Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Our Golden 20s. My name is Sadie, and I'm joined with Teagan.
Hey.
And today we are going to be talking about how to be single. And if you're in a relationship or not, I feel we have some things just on kind of the self-care and self-awareness side of things, kind of in that topic. And then we also want to talk about how to maintain a relationship. If you are in a relationship, maybe just started a relationship, or you've been in a relationship for a while, just want to keep things interesting. We're going to talk about that today too.
Yeah, I feel like fall is the perfect time to get into these kind of like the topics that we talk about year round on our Golden 20s. But I feel like this is when it really hits deep, because it's I feel like the time when you're the loneliest is when it's dark at 5 p.m. and you're just sat by yourself, you know? So I feel like
that's true.
a good time to talk about it.
Yeah, around the holidays, people seem to also kind of feel lonely. So definitely good time of year to be talking about this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of the first thing I wanted to talk about when it comes to being single, is I really feel like there's a difference between being alone and being lonely. And I feel like we've maybe talked about this a little bit before, because as you might know as a listener, I'm single, Teagan is married, and I feel like people kind of just when they talk about relationships with me, they feel like I'm lonely. And the truth is, I feel like I've never felt lonely in my life, really. Obviously you have days where you're just nobody understands me, oh my god, whatever.
Yeah.
But I mean, just all in all, I like being by myself, and I enjoy my own company, I never feel lonely. And I feel like that's just a perfect place to start.
Yeah, and I feel like on the same vein, you can be really lonely even if you're in a relationship. You know, it's
Totally.
not everything's surface level and it's oh, they're single, so they must be lonely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's such a good point.
Yeah, so I feel as far as kind of embracing your single life, a big thing is just kind of embracing the opportunity that's given to you, in which when you're in a relationship, you give up a lot of stuff. And obviously when you're single, you don't have to give that stuff up. And
yeah.
So this is kind of a chance to take advantage of all those things and really, dive deeper into self-reflection and do things that you really want to do, because it is just you.
Yeah, 100%. And again, I feel like if you're in a relationship or not, it's so important to be your own person and to know, who you are, and just have that awareness. And I feel like, again, regardless of your relationship status, it's not really healthy to always rely on somebody else for everything, or, to have this codependency. So I think learning how to enjoy your own company and be your own person is so important. And for me, I've never been in a long-term relationship, really at all. So obviously it's easy for me to say this kind of stuff, but I feel like for me, how I was able to build confidence and, just kind of get in touch with my intuition and just become independent, is because I was so set on just living my life for me kind of thing. And over time, those are the types of skills and traits that I developed.
You're really given the opportunity to reflect on yourself, figure stuff out about yourself. And it gives you the chance, if you're in a relationship, it's a lot harder to be spontaneous and maybe to take bigger risks, because it's more than just one kind of person that you're making those decisions for. So when you're single, it's the time to change careers if you want, move cities, travel, dye your hair, the kinds of things that maybe affect other people, but not if you're single.
Yeah, 100%. It's time that you can dedicate just to you, finding out what your purpose is, setting those goals, learning what your interests and values are, because then it just makes it so much easier to kind of have a base. So when you do find somebody and like start a relationship, like you already have that self-awareness where you're not figuring that out while you're figuring out who you are in a relationship or who you are as a girlfriend or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another thing I think is really important is like finding your own worth and value outside of a relationship. Like you're not unworthy of love because you're not in a relationship. You have to, you know, like love yourself like everyone else does. And just because you're in a relationship doesn't mean that, you know, you're amazing and your worth is through the roof. So that's, I think, something that if you're maybe feeling down about it, is a good reminder of like, just like how like your work doesn't define your worth, your looks don't define your worth, your relationship doesn't define your worth.
Totally. And I feel like it's a cliche, but like how happiness is really reliant on you and it's an inside job. You know what I mean? Like you can't rely on somebody else to make you happy and to make you feel like, you know, to show you your value and your worth and whatnot. Like that's something that you really have to establish on your own. So 100%, I agree so much.
Yeah. Another thing is, because maybe you're listening and you're like, yeah, that's nice, but I am lonely. And so I feel like a good kind of like technique, if that's the case, is to try and focus on like dating yourself. So if that's like joining groups or classes or pursuing hobbies or starting a side hustle, like this is the perfect time because you have free nights and weekends that aren't taken up with another person. And you can focus on literally like taking care of yourself. Like we have one episode about like how to use the love languages for self-love, doing stuff like that to kind of like fulfill you. And then you don't even need another person to feel that worth.
Yeah, 100%.
In addition to that, I think it's also really important to focus on the other relationships in your life, especially if you're feeling lonely. Like there are so many other places where you can find that love, whether it's, you know, you focus on your friends or your family. Those relationships could be more important than a romantic relationship as far as, you know, making you feel good. And so, if you're feeling like, you know, lonely in that situation, I think that that's a good way to kind of fill up that void a little bit.
Yeah, and I think too, like people who obsess over being single, like they're always kind of focused on what they don't have. And I think it's really important to remember that just because you're not a girlfriend, boyfriend, wife, fiance, like whatever that title is, you still have so many other titles in your life. And like you're still so many people to other people in your life, if that makes sense. So for me, I'm like, sure, I'm not a girlfriend, but I'm still a daughter, a granddaughter, a sister, a cat mom, you know, like a coworker at work. Like, you know, there's so many other titles. And again, I think this kind of goes back to your worth and your value is you're not just tied to one thing. And there's so many different things, I guess, in your life and relationships with different people that make you you. And instead of focusing on what you don't have, that's, you know, maybe holding you back from you being part of who you want to be or whatever it is, then it's like, no, just focus on who you do have in your life and all the other titles that you carry and who you are to other people.
Yeah. And I think if you are like really focused, you're single now and you want a relationship, this is also a really good time to kind of reflect about what you're looking for and want from a partner so that when you are like back in the dating sphere, you're not kind of starting from scratch. You kind of have the ideas already there and you are maybe like setting yourself up for more success.
Yeah, 100%. Because I think for like me personally, like I know what like I value and it's like now looking at other people, obviously I'm going to try and, you know, align my values with their values. You know what I mean? Like if we're totally different, I know what's super important to me. And if it's not important to them or whatever, then it's probably not going to work out like long term. So I think that's definitely a great layer of self-awareness to take into a relationship, and then see how a partner can complement you. And I think too, just like on the whole like concept of like having other people in your life, I think one other thing that kind of makes me feel like I'm not missing anything, but I'm kind of gaining something, I guess, from being single this long, or for like being so focused on myself, is how there really isn't another constant in your life. Like people kind of come and go, even if it's family, you know, sometimes families have falling out, friends come and go, like relationships come and go, breakups, divorces, whatever. Like you're the only constant in your life who's there 100% of the time. So it's so important to learn how to trust yourself, how to rely on yourself, how to make decisions by yourself, you know, like know what those values are, know what your interests are, because when it really comes down to it, like, you know, you need to be able to be okay on your own.
Yeah.
And I know obviously people discover themselves through different ways and like through different life experiences. So, you know, some people are figuring those things out about themselves while they're married. And like there's totally nothing wrong with that. But I think it's just while you are single, like if you're listening to this and you're single and you're kind of down about it, like it's a really great time just to really get in touch with yourself and focus on that awareness.
Yeah, in researching for this episode, I read this quote that I really like, that I feel like is a good perspective, maybe if you're someone who's single and, you know, this is something that you're thinking about a lot. And it's that the quote reads, "I'm on my own healing journey, and my future partner is on theirs as well. They're doing the work to be the person I need them to be in a relationship, and I'm doing the same. When the time is right, we'll come together to continue our journeys." And
I love that.
Yeah, because I mean, maybe it's like a cliche thing to say that like when the time is right, it'll work out, but it's like, it's true. Maybe like you're desperate to get into a relationship right now, but you don't want to be in a relationship with a guy who's not emotionally mature enough. And maybe if you met that guy in a year from now, it would turn out better than if you met him now, you know? So it's a good reminder, I think.
Yeah, 100%. And another thing, just kind of on like keeping that perspective, is I really think it's so liberating and fulfilling once you start living your life for you and not, you know, living for other people. So if it's, you know, you were with your high school boyfriend and, you know, then you made decisions based off keeping that relationship, you know, you're making decisions based off staying close to your family. Like once you start just making decisions and living life for you, it's a game changer. And like you really feel this like happiness that you can't feel when you're living for other people. So definitely good perspective to have.
Yeah, and there's so many like great parts of being single that I feel like are often overlooked. Like even, you know, like being in a relationship, there's so much compromise, and obviously like people want to do the compromise to continue to be in the relationship. But I still feel like being single, it should be celebrated that like you get to do whatever you want whenever you want. You get to eat whatever you want. Like you're not, especially when you live with your partner, you're trying to figure out, okay, what's something that they like and I like and fits in our budget. You know, you don't have to worry about that. It's like, I want to eat this. Heck yeah, I'm going to eat it. If you want to go on a vacation, it's not like, oh, well, I was saving my days to go on a trip with them, or they wanted to go to that place with me and they can't afford it right now. Like, you can just go if that's what you want.
Yeah.
And
1000%.
Yeah, I feel like that stuff should be celebrated more, because once you're in a relationship, obviously, like there's good parts of being in a relationship or else people wouldn't be in them. But those things go away. Like that ability to be like almost like it's 100% about you and what you want, which is fun, I think.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And I feel like anytime I like start talking about my singleness to other people, it's like this is maybe like maybe it's a flaw in some ways, but for me, it was always so important for me to build a life on my own.
Yeah.
And exactly like you're saying, Tag, like if I wanted to go somewhere, if I wanted to do something, if I wanted to buy something, I would just do it, you know?
Yeah.
And it was just so important to me. So I didn't want to rely on my parents to pay for things. I didn't want to rely on a boyfriend to take care of me or to do things around, like be the handyman around the house. Like it was so important for me to prove that I can live the life I want to live on my own. And I think it's, yeah, again, just going back to like that fulfilling aspect of it. Like it is so freeing to be like, I can just do whatever I want whenever I want if that's what makes me happy. Like definitely something I think gets overlooked 100%.
Yeah, I keep reading about this. Like I'm reading a lot of self-help books right now and I'm seeing it on TikTok. And it's like a lot of times if you're feeling like stuck in a situation, like you're single and you don't want to be, it just takes kind of like that little perspective switch where it's like, yeah, obviously I want to be in a relationship, but it's not happening right now. So instead, like I should celebrate the good things that come along with me being single. Like I'm saving money because I don't have to spend it on a significant other, and you know, like all the stuff we just talked about, and knowing that maybe in the future you will meet that person and they'll be ready, but in the present, it's good to just celebrate your singleness.
Yeah, 100%. It's definitely not a bad thing to be single.
Yeah, you can still dance to Single Ladies by Beyonce. So that's a huge plus.
Absolutely. Yeah, like I feel there is a like stigma to it. And I feel like there, like especially as I get older, like I feel there's a lot of like just like societal like norms, I guess, and like kind of, I guess, pressures, but it's not anything to feel bad about. And when you kind of like look at someone who, like you said, Tag, are like constantly making compromises and constantly, you know, not doing things they want to do because of whatever reason, if it's, you know, a relationship or whatever, it's like, yeah, all it takes is that perspective shift to be like, I have zero responsibilities. Like, I'm my only responsibility. I have like nothing tying me down. Like, yeah, that's so good.
Yeah, should we talk about relationships now?
Yeah, for sure. I feel you'll lead the conversation on this one since I've already declared that I've not had a relationship before. But I can like throw in my 2 cents from relationships I've observed because you guys know me. I get deep in my feels, observe everything, reflect on it, learn from it.
Yeah. And like I guess I've been dating Tyrell, my husband, for 8 years. But in the grand scheme of like people's relationships, that's like nothing. Like you meet people who have been married for 50 years and it's like crazy. So I feel like I'm definitely still on the journey because I'm young too. Yeah, like I think it would probably be different if we met each other later, like because I did a lot of the self-discovery in the relationship, which is rough, and why I think like a lot of relationships probably when you're younger don't work out because you're still trying to figure out who exactly you are. So we're all learning and growing together.
Yeah. And actually that's a great point that I wanted to kind of make is like a relationship is not the end destination. You know what I mean? Like you as a person, there's never an end destination. Like you're constantly evolving and changing and growing. And that is still the same when you're in a relationship, just your partner is also changing, evolving, and growing, you know? So I think like relationships are a lot of work because of that. And if maybe you are in a relationship right now and you're listening to this to how to maintain a relationship, but you know it's just not something that's maintainable, like that's okay. Like it's natural to sometimes grow apart as you're changing and evolving. But I feel like there are ways to kind of change and evolve together too, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, and the first point I wanted to talk about was having realistic expectations. And I feel like this is a good place to start because it's applicable like if you're starting a relationship or if you've been in a relationship for 20 years. Like you have to have realistic expectations that the person you're dating is a human and all humans have imperfections. And the closer you get to someone, the more you see those imperfections. So if you're, just starting to see someone, they're not going to magically read your mind and get every single thing perfect and know what your love language is right off the hop and, do those kinds of things. And it's the same where if you're in a relationship with someone for 10 years, have, the expectation that they're not going to miraculously change their behavior or, those kinds of things. They're not going to suddenly one day wake up and make you breakfast if they've never made you breakfast before in 10 years. Because I think if you have those unrealistic expectations, that's where a lot of like resentment can come in.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's so true. And I feel like too, I don't know, maybe this isn't accurate, but in my mind, I feel those small imperfections people often view as like, we can work on it, we can change it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Where it's like some things you can't change, like you said. And if it's like a big deal breaker, like I was saying earlier, like different values, like that's probably not something you can change about somebody. And that's 100% what kind of leads to that resentment over time. So I think, yeah, starting with having clear and like realistic expectations is really, really good advice.
Yeah. And like you just said, so much of a relationship is compromising, just like literally any relationship, like a relationship with friends, a relationship with a family member. You have to compromise to kind of meet in the middle. And I feel like that's hard for a lot of people to do because, and it also depends on what it is you're compromising. Like me personally, it drives me crazy that Tyrell doesn't hang up hand towels properly. But that's not the end of the world. And it's like literally no one else will notice. And this is just a thing I've accepted that this is what my life is like. Whereas if the compromise is, I don't know, that your partner like drinks and drives and you're morally against that, well, maybe your relationship isn't going to work out because that is maybe more than a compromise. But I feel like this is kind of like the basis of relationships.
Yeah, 100%. And I think like you were saying, like it's tough when you're young because it's hard to make those compromises that can ultimately lead to you not experiencing something. Like, for instance, compromising on what school you go to. Like that can shape your education, which can then shape your job, like it's just like things like that or those bigger kind of life moments. So I feel like knowing relationships take compromise, like it's a healthy give and take situation.
Yeah.
Obviously, your partner needs to be making compromises sometimes too. Like, it shouldn't just be one of you or the other. But I think that is something definitely to be mindful of 100%.
Yeah. And I feel like I'm kind of a person who believes that like the smaller things are the easiest compromises to give.
Totally.
Like, let's say your partner doesn't like to watch rom-coms and you're like, yeah, okay, I'll just watch those like by myself. That's fine. Like, that's a really minor compromise. But if you're like, my dream is to live in New York City and your partner's like, I never ever want to go to the city ever. Well, that's maybe too big of a compromise, like it's literally like a person-to-person scenario, and your whole life is kind of made up of micro compromises, I guess. But then it's when the big ones come in where that can kind of make or break a relationship, I think.
Yeah. And I feel every time we talk about relationships, we just stress how important like communication is. But I feel like I'm going to throw it in at this time, like this point in the podcast as well. Because it's like you need to like communicate what is important to you. You know what I mean? Like you need to communicate and have like honest communication, even if it's uncomfortable. Like even if, you're very set on something and it's clear your partner sees it differently or something like that, or you're unwilling to compromise and they're unwilling to compromise. Like it it doesn't mean like you can just kind of accept it as that. Like you need to kind of like have that communication and figure it out. Find, I guess, like where the give and take happens from each side through communicating.
And I think what you said is exactly right, where is if something is important to you, don't give it up just because, oh, well, it's what they want and I want this relationship, because all that will do is breed resentment. Like if you don't move to New York City because your significant other doesn't want to, and you're like, well, I love them, so I won't move, you're just going to be pissed about it for the rest of your life. And it's like that's not going to build a good relationship. If anything, that's going to break it down, and then you'll be single and won't be in New York City. Like,
exactly.
If it's something that's important to you, you need to have those discussions, I think.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. The next point I had was just that a relationship takes effort. Like, I feel like there's maybe a mental image that, like, when you first start dating, that's when it's really hard. And then once you're like in a relationship, it's easy. But I don't necessarily find that true. Like there are easy parts to all sort of times in dating, and there are hard parts too. And I feel like when you're in a relationship, especially like a really long-term one, this is where you can kind of just get like stuck going through the motions. And so I feel like doing stuff like purposely scheduling dates and that kind of stuff, having the regular and honest communication, even something as, I don't know, like silly as purposely asking how their day was, like that's opening a stream of communication.
100%. My sister and her boyfriend just bought a house, and I was asking her how that's going on their relationship, because they're doing renovations and, you know, that's a stress on her relationship. And she said every Sunday they have check-ins with each other, and they just say, okay, Sunday check-in time. How are you feeling? You know, are you stressed? What are you stressed about? Like, and they just have these like check-ins. And I thought that was such like a mature, good thing to do.
Yeah.
Obviously they do this because like this is a stressful time in their lives. Like their lives continue to go on, like their jobs and their relationship, family stuff continues to happen. And then they're throwing like renovating a house on top of it.
Yeah.
But it's like, how great is that? You know, you have those check-ins with yourself. I feel like, at least I do, like when I'm journaling or whatever, like that's essentially what I'm doing, just like checking in with myself. But to just like pointedly ask somebody like, how are you doing? I just thought that was such a great tip for, I guess like that communication, but also just like putting in the effort, asking them, how are you doing? And then going with it.
Something Tyrell and I do only when like one of us is really stressed, say like we have something big coming up or like something's really busy at work, is this is where I reveal that I was a camp counselor. We do our roses, thorns, and rosebuds before we go to sleep. So this is what I used to do with my little children. And we're all just children on the inside, so I think it works.
At heart.
Yeah. So we're working with our inner child. And then we just say, and it can be like, if we decide it just is going to be like 3 words, or we can go into detail. So it's just like your rose is your favorite part of the day, your thorn is your least favorite, and your rosebud is one thing you're looking forward to. And then it's kind of a good way to like touch base, but it's so like low key. Yeah. Like the stakes are very low. That's why I like it.
Yeah. And I think too, like knowing that rose, you know what I mean? Like what they're excited about, what they're happy about, or the rosebud, I guess, is more so it. Like, you know what is important to them, and then you know like kind of where you can help show them support, and like where you can cheer them on, and like that kind of thing. Because I think that's the other thing about relationships that take a lot of effort is you have your own life going on, they have their own life going on, and you're meeting in the middle, you know? And obviously parts of your life are intertwined, and your stuff becomes my stuff and whatever. But it's also like that big project at work, like you were talking about. Like if you're really busy, you know, you still need to make sure that you're not making your partner's wins or exciting things in their life smaller because it's less of a priority in your life. You know what I mean? So I think it also just takes effort, of course, on the checking in, but also on the actual supporting of each other too.
Yeah, in a great way to know how to support them is to learn what your partner's love language is. So this is something we talk about all the time. But like if you're doing acts of service for your partner, but their love language is gifts,
words of affirmation.
Yeah, whatever it is, they're not going to feel the love that you're trying to give them, and they're not going to feel the support because they'll be like, oh, all I wanted was you to like run out and get me a coffee and say that you loved me. And maybe you loaded the dishwasher and they didn't even notice because that's just not something they do. Yeah. And so I think that that's another really good thing about, you know, learning what they like. And then if they're in a high stress situation and you know your love language, that's how you support them and show them love and appreciation.
Yeah, I love that so much. I feel like before we did our episode on love languages, I didn't know any of them. Like, I didn't know what my love language was. Like, I just didn't even like know anything about it. But now I think it's such a great way to strengthen relationships and just to like, again, it is kind of comes down to that communication too. Just like knowing how you can like, communicate to somebody like how much you appreciate them or like whatever it is, show them love. So I think that's such a great way to like strengthen a relationship and like maintain it, you know?
Yeah, the next thing I wanted to talk about was how like just because you're in a relationship, that doesn't mean that everything else in your life gets put on the back burner. Like your relationship is not the most important thing in your life 99% of the time. And I feel like you and I have both talked about seeing people who, like, as soon as they get into a relationship, it's like you're no longer friends with them because they just only have time for that relationship. Or even like I know some people who stop working because they're like, I'm just going to stay at home and support them, which is fine if that's your choice. But I just feel like it's important to say that you need to leave room for yourself in your relationship, like schedule in alone time to do things that you enjoy by yourself, to do your self-care and balance the other parts of your life. Like don't cut off your family, don't cut off your friends, still prioritize your work because this is just one asset of your life. And I feel like you need all of these things to make your life really full.
Totally. I love that so much. And when you were talking about dating yourself in like the first part of this episode, I feel like all those things, like if it's workout classes, hobbies, whatever you do in that alone time, like those are all things that you're doing to fill your cup, you know? And I feel like when you go into a relationship, you want or when you show up for your partner, like you want your cup to be full because if you're running on empty, you have nothing left to give to your partner. So I think it's like if you're having a hard time prioritizing alone time and like me time when you're in a relationship, that's a really great reason to make sure it is a priority. Is the better care you take of yourself, the better care you can take of other people, including your partner.
Yeah. The last kind of thing I wanted to talk about, which is, I think I read this somewhere, but it was something I was guilty of. And then as soon as I read it, I was like, oh my God, they're so right. But it's that you should be mindful about what you're sharing from your relationship. So obviously, like your boyfriend or your girlfriend, they like piss you off. So then you call up your friend, get a glass of wine and rant to them. Like that's totally normal. But I think you need a reminder that if all you're telling your friends or your family are the times that your significant other is annoying you or messing up, they don't get to see when they make it up to you. They don't get to see like how much they love you. They only hear what you're telling them.
Yeah.
And so it can be hard if your friend has heard for 6 months about how, oh, he was late for this date. Oh, he forgot about me. Oh, he didn't get me a gift for my birthday. And then you're like, here, I want to introduce my boyfriend. Like, they're probably not going to like him.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's just like it shapes the people in your life like bias towards your partner. You know what I mean? And like that's not fair at all. It's like they already have this like preconceived like notion of this person without even knowing them that well, you know? So definitely not good. I also think about that though, like in a family situation, like you know, like mom and dad's kind of like opinion of each other kind of influences how the kids think of them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that is definitely something you should be mindful of 100%, especially for like a healthy relationship. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. And you don't want to get in the habit if like all you tell your friends is bad things about your partner because you're ranting or whatever it is. You don't want to get in a habit of that being all you see in your partner. You know what I mean? Like if you're like just looking for conversation with your friends because you've fallen in the habit of just ranting about your boyfriend to them, that's a problem.
And it like, I guess it is harder to be like, yeah, so my boyfriend gave me a hug today and it was the best hug. Like, that's not like a great conversation piece, but it's like, that's realistically what a relationship is. Like, obviously the things that annoy you, you're like, oh, this annoys me so much. But then it's like, you know, all the little micro like happy moments that aren't, you know, magical to talk about or whatever. Like, oh, he brewed me coffee this morning. Like, no one wants to hear about that. But those are like the little minor things that make up a good relationship, I think.
Yeah, I love that. Awesome.
All right. Well, that is where we are going to leave it this week. So thank you so much for listening. If you liked what you heard, be sure to follow and subscribe to us so that you could see when we put out new episodes. Those drop every single Tuesday. And in between that, you can follow us on social media at Our Golden 20s. We are on Instagram, Facebook, Spotify, TikTok, Pinterest. We also have a Patreon page, which is the best way to show your support for the podcast. And we put out the episodes early there. And we want to thank you for listening.